Welcome to Philly Coco Presents Side Project Spotlight, Episode 70. It's a developer's journey to making cool stuff. I'm Kotaro.
I'm Steve.
And I'm Aaron.
And we are Philly Coco, a Philadelphia-based Cocoa Heads community focused on Apple development. That primarily, but not exclusively, means iOS, Mac, tvOS, watchOS, and visionOS development. Philly Coco's true desire is to take you higher on your own developer journey. Whew.
Nice.
And I mean that in like, it is hot out
Yeah.
today.
And
oh my goodness.
We have to turn off our air conditioners to record properly for your listening pleasure. So the temperature is rising by like a degree a minute in here or something.
We're gonna keep this more short and sweet than normal.
That's what we always say. Let's see if we actually can pull it off this time before we cook.
Okay.
You're recording this after the July 4th holiday, during the second heat wave, I guess, of the season. It's typical July for me. Like, this is not unusual for me for July in my apartment. It's just third floor. It's super hot, but it's not fun. But what did we come here to talk about today, though? Because we were at a loss until I learned that Kotaro, you were crazy enough to install the beta of macOS. So
there's levels of crazy when it comes to beta, installing beta software. iOS, normally like the level one is like you're crazy enough. Curtis, we're talking about you. Slopes.com. That we're willing to put the beta on beta 1 immediately during WWDC on their personal iPhone, right? That's crazy level 1, borderline. All right, borderline level 2. And then you kind of go, okay, like actually it's not that crazy to think if you have like a spare iPhone or iPad, fine, put it on that beta. In fact, I have the beta on my iPad as well, like beta 3, I think it is at this point, the recording. But for some silly reason, because I already have a work laptop that I use more regularly, not at home, but like, just on the regular 9 to 5. I don't use my personal as much as I probably could. I use it for like more experimental stuff, like little game development here, little Xcode there, and with the Xcode beta. But then I found out in order for you to even sniff the AI, the Apple intelligence, I had to install the this new version of, what is it, Mac Sequoia?
Right? 15, right? macOS 15.
macOS 15.
Sequoia.
So, if you're a rational developer, you would either put the set Sequoia on an external drive, and or you would partition your hard drive. So I should say create another volume and install it on that volume and just dual boot between the two.
Yep.
I've done that in the past.
I'm still scared to do that. I shouldn't be, but I had just bad experiences in my formative computing years with partitioning hard drives.
It's easy to get wrong for sure. Like, I'll look at the instructions and they're not up to date half the time, so they're like for like a version back, like 1 or 2 back. So like the labeling is all messed up, and then next thing you know, you got your volumes that say data or something like that. It's a lot of like weirdness that goes on with partitioning. But I did that once, and I said, okay, that's cute. I was able to like reconstruct my volume, like once I finished the beta, I'm like, okay, now you have to like erase the beta section and then like reconstruct it back into to be a part of the full storage, to be a part of like the one partition, right? Not too bad, not too horrible. Having said all that, I was like, I haven't heard any horror stories, and I'm not I've already backed up my hard drive, so I'm not particularly concerned if something weird goes on, like something breaks or something like that. This machine is relatively I haven't really pushed it to its extremes, that I haven't really used it that much just yet, so I feel comfortable in like where I have like tons of files and configurations and sort of like personalizations, all that stuff. So I feel relatively comfortable. Just let me install the beta, see how it goes. And much to my surprise, my non-surprise, relatively painless.
Nice.
In fact, I forgot that this thing has window management until I did it the other day, and I was like, oh, okay, it's kind of interesting. So I haven't really explored it too much, so I'm really like just letting the discoveries happen as they come.
Which beta version is this? Like the third one or something?
Actually, you know what's kind of interesting? I don't know if this is for the Mac at least. I don't think this is beyond beta 2 just yet. I could be wrong. To be reasonably fair, never mind. You know what? I do not have beta 3 installed on this hard drive, but there is a command line update for beta 3 for Xcode. Well, to be fair, also Xcode beta 3 has just come out. Anyway.
Yeah, what we're saying is you've installed enough of the betas to get predictive code completion.
Yes.
And so that is it. Do you know which beta that came in? Has that been in there? Or is that's just with?
It might have been with beta 2.
Okay.
One of the interesting, it's there now. One of the interesting things is that I did not pay attention. So I installed beta 2 and I didn't install the extra stuff. Normally, like, you want to install the iOS updates, the iOS SDK, blah, blah, blah. And it gives, but it also it began installing maybe about a 2.5 gigs, somewhere in that range, model, a predictive model, the exact phrasing that they used. I actually took a screenshot of this. Predictive code completion model at 2.23 gigs.
So this is 100% on device?
Yes. At least this one is. So I can show you real quick what that looks like. Oh, wait. I have to open this. Okay. Never mind. I thought I was going to be able to do it, but I forgot because I'm a fool that I would have to quit and update. But basically what happens is that you can do it I don't know if you've done any if you use Visual Studio code completion with Copilot.
Not with Copilot, no.
And I've done some I'm not entirely sure which is the Copilot part and which is maybe just Android doing it for you, but there's some code completion in Android that is actually quite good. I can start to, like, maybe I might create a constant, in my view, and I might start out with like, and it'll do a very good job of predicting, like, is show sheet or something like that, and it'll just do the rest, colon, boolean, false, whatever, and then I'll enter another one and might actually guess with fair level of success. Oh, you probably meant to name this particular variable this based on the context of the entire view. And so it'll go down, so I can go down sort of like pseudo rabbit holes and really explore pushing the expectation. So it'll do things like, if I have a for loop, it'll guess the for loop style of like a for each for loop of like, you probably meant this view model. I'm going to stick that in there.
Yeah.
I'm going to add the forgot what the escape enclosure variables values that come out of it that you put in, and then it'll go and it's like, okay, fine, I know what you mean. You probably meant, since it's a list view, you probably want to add this particular row item in this way, and so on and so forth. So it'll do all that for you relatively successfully in Android Studio, at least that variation of it, when I was doing some work in Flutter. Same thing here with the Xcode code completion. It does a lot of that it's doing a lot of guesswork for you. Sometimes a little, like, just recently I just discovered it was very aggressive in terms of like, it'll just throw in code as like, do you want to, you have this, like I was experimenting in the destination video Apple tutorial.
Yeah.
So it's usually, in this case, it's usually like a typical, like if you've seen these typical streaming apps, right? And they have a very generic layout of like rows of movies and stuff like that. It's the same similar type of look and vibe. This kind of does this thing where it's doing some predictive, like, oh, you want to put a tab view here and you want to put it in a variable, we can, call it destination tab, and like it'll construct it and like have it at the ready for you if you want to complete that.
Yeah. It's very aggressive.
Very aggressive. I was like, oh, okay, I didn't ask for it, but that's cute. Actually, probably I'm going to just take a quick look if it was doing anything while I was like not talking.
Like you're not even touching the keyboard and it's just doing stuff.
Like I'm not touching the keyboard. Like here, I just put myself in a new line. I'm gonna like leave it alone for a second, and so far it's not doing anything. But like it will do things like it's generally pretty good about like when you start typing, it's very good about like predicting like, oh, you do a private and then you do let is boolean is destination something, I don't know. Yeah. And then it'll start to figure it out, although right now it's not doing it for me, and so maybe it's not as good as as a beta. It's like it's either hyper aggressive or maybe it's broken.
Yeah, and this isn't even the Swift Assist stuff, which hasn't come out yet. This is just predictive code completion, what they're calling it.
Yeah, this is just like as you said, Aaron. It's a local model for sure.
Yeah.
Because what the Swift Assist is going to be using like the private cloud stuff.
I suspect so. The way that contextually that might work, and that's the thing, right? Like I don't know. I haven't really pushed this code completion stuff to know for sure. For example, if I wanted to if I did a highlight, it doesn't do anything. Like if I do a highlight, if I highlight my file, or even like give it a context of my project and say, hey, no, let me go back and back to the simple example. If I highlight my file and say, hey, can you refactor this whole thing and add some unit tests of that? It won't do that for you. It's just code completion.
Swift Assist. Yeah.
That would be Swift Assist.
This sounds a lot like Intellicode from Microsoft.
Yes.
It's in Visual Studio. And I've been playing around with that a little bit. And let's see in this little screen share I have for you guys, but you listening, I'll have to describe it. But does this look at all like what you're talking about? Because what I found, and I've been doing a little bit of Visual Studio stuff on a PC lately, and it's a little aggressive and it's not always very smart, but it's trying to take into account like the context of the code around it to give me suggestions. And sometimes it's kind of useful, like for boilerplate stuff, but I find it's like not right most of the time.
Or did they have a better version of that in prior versions of Visual Studio? Because I think this one is less like, for lack of a better word, verbose, right? Like I remember when I was using Visual Studio's code completion back in the day, like it was very good about understanding the context of, like it would show you all the options that you had and allow you to sort of sub-select, right? Like,
that's IntelliSense. I think it's IntelliSense. That's what they call IntelliSense. So it gives you like a list of stuff. Mm-hmm. Whereas Intellicode tries to give you it tries to pick up context and give you code suggestions. Whereas IntelliSense is more like giving you APIs. Like it's giving you the suggestions of the next part of the API that you could use. Like if you like in the example I'm looking at on the screen here, it has a path object, and then you say dot, and it gives you starts with length. These are all like properties on that object. Whereas Intellicode example in this on the Microsoft.com website, it's it's just actually spitting out code that matches what was already previously typed on the screen. In the same context, with like variable names and stuff. So I find it's a little confusing. I agree that the difference is I didn't realize that it was on because I was just doing stuff, and then all of a sudden, like my tab completions, it started like shooting code in out of nowhere. I'm like, what is happening? And then I figured it's because this is the latest version of Visual Studio. I haven't used it before, and it's doing this code completion. Now, I could see this as being useful. I mean, it's, as I said, somewhat useful, the thing I was doing, but it's not. It's also not like Swift Assist. They have Copilot for that, and I've never tried Copilot. But this is like, again, everybody seems to be converging on the same tooling, where it's like we have something like IntelliSense or code completion, which we've had forever, which is interrogating the objects, the functions you're using, and then giving you trying to predict what your next call will be or the next property you might want to access or something. Then you got this like Intellicode or Apple needs a better name than predictive code completion. It needs like a nice catchy name. But similar thing where it's just like giving you chunks of code in context, like you say equals, and then it just spits out a bunch of boilerplate. Then you got like the Copilot and the Swift Assist, which are full on LLMs where you can just be like basically putting in a prompt and then getting out a whole bunch of code.
Actually, it's kind of funny. I just, while you were talking, and not because I was not paying attention, but it was because the Apple code completion allow me to do a private let, and because there's a private var player component as a view model, I guess it goes, okay, I do is present it I added let is, right, as if to imply like it's going to be a Boolean value of some kind, and it gave me back as a default, it gave me back is presenting video player equals binding Boolean at a Boolean value, and then it allows me to complete that. It continues to complete that as a getter and a setter.
Is that all right?
I mean, I'm not entirely sure if it's all right. It's just more like player dot presentation equals full window, and then the setter is like basically if it's a new value, then basically do the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, I didn't ask for that, and I don't know if that's that. It just feels like it's trying to guess ahead of time, even though it's not.
That's what it's trying. That's
correct.
what the things are trying to do. They're trying to. Trying to predict what you might want to do, so that hopefully you don't have to type as much boilerplate code. Is what I guess. I mean, that's optimization.
I will test this out and do a demo at our monthly meeting, and then maybe Side Project Saturday show you in person.
Oh, that'd be cool.
So just a teaser for anybody.
I'm not installing the beta.
Yes.
Not on my
don't
machine.
Don't install. Don't be reckless like me. Don't install that beta.
So you also wrote in our notes DocC. Is that something that works?
Oh yeah. Well, okay. In this case, probably not. Although I have not tried. Let me see if I can find it in it. Just sorry. I wish I could. Is it supposed
to generate the DocC, or is it supposed to use the DocC as context, or like is that what are you talking about?
It's supposed to. So in the way I've been using, so on some level, I've been testing. I've been baby stepping my way through Copilot. Unlike most developers are actually pretty good about at least trying it seriously, whereas I've been very selective of when I decide to use it.
Yeah.
So in the case of DocC, I don't want to necessarily write constant boilerplate stuff, so I might go, hey, here's an init with all the parameters. You can tell what it is. Give me a good give me a documentation in the format. Give me some good DocC documentation on that init, right? And it'll do a pretty good job of it. It'll still be generic. So it'll say, like, for example, if you've added some defaults in the parameters, like a nil value for optionals or something like that, or like if you have like a Boolean, you want to set it to false, it will acknowledge that in those parameter document, the parameter parts of the documentation. But it will be sort of like very I don't know, like it won't. It's not quite. You still have to edit the format or the style of.
What editor are you doing this then?
I'm doing that in Visual Studio Code because that's where I have Copilot connected to.
Okay, yeah. So you're doing DocC for some Swift project in there? Or
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
For a Swift project specifically. So I might use that for like adding like generic like in areas that I can like areas where I feel confident that like I'm not like I don't want to do this repetitive task or this very like tedious task. I might give it to Copilot and say, give me something put some documentation here and then I'll review it and I'll see whether I like it or not. A lot of it is almost like glorified PR review at that point because you're just PR reviewing DocC's work, but maybe they've done a majority, like maybe 70% of what you would have written.
Yeah. Well, I mean, documentation is a good. Well, the DocC, the type of automated documentation that you generate that there's been some kind of auto generation kind of built into these editors for a while, but that kind of generation where it's just API documentation can make sense to me to try to automate the generation of, because then you have more of it available. But it's not you writing like a tutorial or something with.
Like I would still want it to be like the kind of thing, like it would be great to consider, like, you know what, let me just throw this whole batch of files and have it run through like some kind of DocC batch, right? Using Copilot or whatever to like just slice and dice through it. Give me something that generates a PR, and I will take a look at it and then edit from there. I think that's actually a pretty good use case to try out.
I feel like there have been tools that do like auto generation of API documentation before.
I'm sure there is.
But that's like a good use case potentially for burning billions of dollars worth of GPU time or whatever.
Well, the other one I joke about using, but I have tested out, was unit tests. So I might go, okay, write me a unit test for this particular function, and it's still horrible, but at least it will try. Yeah, Copilot will not necessarily, because the thing is, like, it doesn't understand the full context of that.
Well, like, no, because the TDD gods would tell you that's not what unit tests are. You're supposed to design the software with the test.
Listen, man. I'm not here to wait to burn my time. All right, on these strong disciplinary things that make you a better programmer.
Oh yeah, I don't need that. I just need the computer to do it for me. Yeah, you've been talking about wanting to do this forever, and it still can't quite do it because it's not intelligent, people. It's an algorithm.
No, and you know what's funny? I did this hilarious. I'm trying to remember exactly the full context of this. Just recently, maybe about a day or two ago, I was like trying to figure out this way to do some complicated UI thing in Swift UI, and I found the solution in a Stack Overflow question, and I was like, okay, before I go ahead and like try to like implement this using the Stack Overflow thing, let me see what Copilot says about this idea, and because it was like one of those questions that was like the only answer to this problem, right? So it was to me, it was like, it doesn't really even look like the solution that I'm looking for,
right?
But okay, let me at least acknowledge that there's something there that's interesting. Let me throw it into Copilot and see what that says. It gives me the exact same parameters, the exact same properties that the Stack Overflow question gave.
Ooh, really?
For this specific question. Even though I phrased it in
how predictable. It's almost as if these things are like giant databases of other people's content.
Of course, I just realized what it was in context to, like WebView.
Oh God, your nemesis. No, it's just never leaves you alone. Yeah.
Well, in this case, like, how do I refresh and then make that thing come back in the way that I, like with a callback or some binding that would tell me something like how to.
I've done that.
It's not refreshing. Yeah, it's relatively straightforward. So I assume like the answer is out there, but apparently it's not that frequent of an answer. So
it's overfit or whatever on the data. So it's that's the thing. That's what I just cringe at the AI people on the interwebs who are like, the machines are coming for us. They're super intelligent, blah, blah, blah. They're like a life form or whatever, AGI, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, whatever. It's not the case. I struggle to find great utility for most of any of these tools, really. I find a little bit of utility, but I find they're just not that useful to me at this point. And I think it's good also, I think, to think about when you should use these and when you shouldn't use these types of tools, because they are still very new, but there is a lot of like super excited people, a lot of inexperienced people who are just, I think, going full tilt into using these tools to their own detriment.
I mean, I will try to use them in ways that I think, okay, maybe this is helpful. And so sometimes I will try to use it to refactor code that I know is not good.
What do you mean refactor code? Like Because when I think refactor code, I think I know what I'm trying to do.
Right. Like I'll do the happy path, right? And I'll be like, all right, let me see if Copilot can give me a cleaner version of this. And it's only better like 40% of the time. And which is a fairly okay thing, but it depends on the context. But half the time
it depends on, like, are you writing code that's in the database, as it were? Like, I mean, has this been done before? Like, the problem with these tools is that they're not useful when you're doing something that's not represented in the data set that was used to quote unquote train it models.
So the funny thing about this, right, is like sometimes I'll look at the solution and it will functionally work, but it's less readable.
Yeah, because it was like trained on awful open source code or something.
It is technically cleaner because it's one line versus maybe three.
Well, that's the Copilot's the definition of clean that it gathered from the training data, but that's not your definition of clean necessarily.
No, I mean, and I'm like, okay, how much of this is like it's borderline like okay, revertible. Okay. It's borderline like more like this feels like it belongs in the reverting state versus like okay, you know what? I'm going to put this in because I accept that it is a one-line solution versus 3 lines.
Yeah.
Is that better? I'm in like I could take it or leave it kind of look. Feel.
How often? How often is it just broken? Like
the code?
Yeah. It is. Oh yeah, it's broken all the time.
Yeah, all the time. It makes up stuff whenever I try it.
It is confidently wrong.
It confabulates.
100% of the time, it is confidently. It is confident in its answer, and it's 30% of the time. Let me rephrase that. Revert that. 70%, 80% of the time, there's something broken, or it gets the naming incorrect, or you can tell it is. It's like a hodgepodge of different solutions put together.
Yeah, you know where this stuff might be useful. I haven't tried it. I've seen some interesting use cases of models on command lines interfaces, and like I know people have used like ChatGPT to generate like the command line for different tools that are very complicated, have a lot of flags and stuff. Like that's pretty useful because there's lots of documentation about it. There's lots of like examples that were in the data set, and it's a thing you probably don't do all the time, and it's like it makes sense. You're like, okay, write me the command that does this, and it'll be able to do it because probably 1,000 other people have done it and posted blog posts about it, or whatever, because it's so annoying. Like that kind of stuff, super useful, I think. Or if it's like totally unfamiliar code, like if I had to write some Python code now, I'd probably go to, Copilot or something like. But like I'd use one of these tools for that. Like I'm not super familiar with Python anymore. It's been a long time. I'm like, it's stupid Python. Braces and crap, so I don't like it. And so it's like just write me some code to do this, and then I'd start with that as a starting place. If I need to make like a one-off script or something, that might be useful. But if I'm doing my job, I'm not relying on this stuff. Like I'm not writing Swift code with like a giant chunks of randomly generated, like just like arbitrarily generated code from one of these LLMs, And it's in fact, I find a lot of the stuff kind of gets in the way if I do that. If I try to do it, it's like because I know what I'm doing, and in the computer algorithm does not, and it's trying to be like helpful, I guess, but it's not really, because it's just regurgitating stuff that other people wrote that was put in its training set, and I'm like, I'm doing things my way, and I know they can get better. They can try. The idea is to try to use your own code base and stuff as part of it, and maybe it'll get better at that point for auto completing things. But if you're doing anything novel, it's not that useful because it's novel. It's not going to be represented in there. And if it's very common, that's fine if you already know what you're doing. I think the real danger with these tools for software developers is the inexperienced developers who think that using these tools helps you learn. And I'm like, it absolutely does not help you learn, because if you just use code that something generated for you, how are you learning it? It's like if you were trying to learn
by fixing it.
Well, that is, you can learn debugging that way. Yeah, you learn by fixing it. But how do you know how to fix it if you haven't, like if you don't know what you're doing? I feel like it's kind of dangerous that, not in like a physical sense, but it's not, I don't think it's particularly useful. It's It's like, how do you learn how to write if you don't write? Like, if you just had a computer to generate your essays for you, you're never going to learn how to write. Same thing with, and then you're not going to be able to learn how to recognize like a written essay and understand what makes a good essay or a bad essay. You've never written one. You just have the computer regurgitate other people's versions of it and confabulate it together. Same thing with these code completion things. In narrow use cases, well directed by someone who knows what he's doing, as we've described in some use cases, can be useful, at least to a point. Maybe will get you more useful in the future. But I think the rush to be like, you can learn with this. I just don't see that. That's not how you learn. You don't learn by having copying and pasting essentially in a faster way. Maybe as you're saying, you're like very careful and you're narrowly approaching it. You're working on a problem, you're trying to do it, and then maybe you're getting examples of stuff that might work in like function at a time or something. Mm-hmm. And then, as Aaron says, you're fixing it. Maybe that can help, because I mean that's not too dissimilar, I guess, from like looking up stuff. But it's the problem. I feel like is that there's just a lot of hype about like, you don't need to learn how to really program. You can just like trust these machines, and you should never ever let machines make decisions for you, or because machines are not ever accountable. You are, as a human being, you have to know what the code that you're writing or generating or whatever compiling does. You have to understand it. And I don't know if these tools are helping people understand code. I think it's quite the opposite. I think it's helping people regurgitate stuff that kind of barely works faster.
I think it's kind of interesting. I don't know, Aaron, do you have a particular opinion at the moment?
No, I haven't played around with these things too much. So.
I think because I've experimented with it on a Flutter project, and just as a sort of like it was an experiment prototype kind of thing, and it was just trying to really utilize it for, it got me out of a few binds, but it also,
because you're not super familiar with Flutter, but there's enough.
I'm not super familiar with Flutter, but
you know how it works. You know how the app, the structure, and there's enough representative, data in there that you can get some useful out of it.
If you're coming from SwiftUI, Flutter is not that hard of a departure, partially because a lot of SwiftUI is influenced by Flutter,
right?
In terms of its sort of reactive style and its layouts and its use of, their version is more like parameter based, whereas we use a lot of dot notation as with modifiers to construct our views or describe our views. The caveat is like Flutter gives you 20 different options, 2,000 different options, not including all the third-party packages you can probably download that you need to make a competent Flutter app. And they're all competing for your attention. And apparently, like the default state management system is not the one that everybody recommends. Everybody recommends like two versions of it.
So I mean, how does the tool know what to pick? It's like you have to make, like, programming is not writing the code. That's like the smallest part of programming. But to understand what to write requires experience writing code. It's just like, I just think you can't not write code. You have to write. Like when I tried to learn SwiftUI, like the only way to get it, to really grok it, was to write it, a bunch of it, until I was like, okay, now I understand what it's doing. And it's like, I mean, like physically, you have to, you actually have to go through a stage where you're typing in the code yourself, all of it, I think, because otherwise, and you can't take shortcuts to learning. I guess that's my ultimate point. If you think you can use these tools as a beginner to shortcut, and I've seen people like post stuff like this, like you can't shortcut learning. Like there is no shortcutting to learning. You're a human being. You learn through doing it. You can't just have a computer do it for you and then somehow, like through osmosis, whatever, learn, like why that code works or why it was published, whatever. It's just that's not how you learn anything, and you don't learn programming that way.
I think the way I've sort of looked at it from a context of like a personal growth point of view is if you look at any athlete or chef or cook or something like that, or people who have a craft that they focus on, right? Everything is all their learning is built on repetition, experimentation, failing,
foundation,
constantly. These are foundational learning tools.
Doing things,
constant doing it repeatedly
before
every day.
You have to learn the fundamentals before you can use the shortcuts. Like that's what it is. And these
nobody
to me,
just magically ChatGPT's a jump shot. You know?
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like when you're more of a senior developer, and you can get more utility out of these. And it also depends on what field. Like we are not web developers, and I think these tools work best, it seems, in the web development space because there's just so much more code out there for all kinds of web development frameworks that were in the training sets, and it seems like web developers get a lot more utility out of this stuff. But if you're senior and it has enough training data in the model to, and you're doing things that are representative in the model, then like you can have it generate chunks of code for you reliably that work okay, and you're fine. But if you're a beginner, more of an inexperienced person, like how do you can't even judge the output of these things as well, like because by definition you don't understand what you're doing yet because you're inexperienced. And it's like that's where I think the danger lies. And I wonder how organizations are going to balance this, because there's potential for some productivity gains with this, with maybe senior people, but I think there's actually more danger with like bad code or like copyright infringement or something if you're using these without real care.
I think I remember this podcast. It's not so much that you'll definitely see more of this stuff, right? But there's no escaping that point. But you're not increasing the skill level or the productivity in the way you would think you are. You're actually increasing the mediocriity of the work
because it's regurgitating. Well, because it's regurgitating the code.
Because and then you're decreasing the skill level of the real programmers who will be dependent. Like this is one of the reasons why I'm not that great of a fan of tests, because like we are very good about building mediocre tests, because that's just not what we're into. 95% of programmers, you're gonna tell me that there's always that one that's like the Uncle Bob types that will be like, I love tests.
When I did Perl, I was that guy because Perl at the time anyway I was doing it had a very good system. Like it was very easy to write tests and run them and check them, and it's been not the case historically for like Xcode.
Any dynamic language like say PHP,
well, you definitely need more
Rails,
tests with
you definitely want to have tests just because of
I'll argue it's not. I would argue we all should be writing more tests, especially now that like the testing frameworks on like Xcode are getting better with like Swift testing and some other options. Because it's a discipline that helps you design your software. It's not just about, and it's also something that helps you later on when you want to refactor things. I have many times regretted not writing like a full suite of tests or doing TDD or something like with some code, because I have to modify it like long in the future. And I'm like, oh crap, I've refactored this, but now I have no way to guarantee that my refactor isn't breaking something because I don't have comprehensive tests for this. So then I have to basically write them in order to do that. I should have just done it the right way the first time. But I never regret having written tests, even a few tests. Like, I was working on something recently and was in like Visual Studio. And it's like it had a few tests, weren't very good tests, but they were better than nothing. And it allowed me to move forward far faster than if I had nothing. So
I find like anytime I've sort of said, you know what, I'm going to need to write a test for this, it's always because I can never have full confidence that the output of the code that I write would always be correct. And I wanted to make sure, and that had to be correct. And so I always said, you know what, I'm going to bite the bullet for this particular piece and make sure and write a test and make sure that I've covered all the edge cases, because this code feels brittle and I need to make sure that what I break, when I change this or refactor this, nothing breaks.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're sidetracking into a whole discussion about testing, but we could have a whole episode about that. But like I guess the thing is like these tools don't really help you too much with tests. I mean, like, I guess that's what it comes down to.
Well, the thing is, like, it goes back to like who's testing the test, right? In the sense of like,
I
like if you like are like me and think of ridiculous thoughts about like, oh, I can have, whatever Copilot write these tests for me and then be done with my ticket or whatever. And it's like
I think it depends on also like the structure of the code you're trying to put on your test, because if you can infer like, logically, mathematically, these are the inputs, this is the expected output, and like here's and you should be I think you should be able to use these tools to help you generate, because a lot of tests have very repetitive patterns. And you end up just using code complete a lot to be like, yes, I need the same things over and over again with slight variations in names of things, or use this mock in this test and this mock, and you know what I mean? There's a lot of repetition. So I think you should theoretically be able to use these things to be like, I'm testing this function. Here's my expected output. Write me the test for this. And then because their tests should be short and easy to understand anyway, you can then review the output real quick. Like, okay, that's right. And you just save yourself typing. And maybe that is a benefit. Depends on how accurate that kind of generation will work. It doesn't seem like in our use cases it's there yet. At least yours. I've never tried it for tests. But but maybe I think it's theoretically possible anyway that we should be able to
I would love to do a way so that like, and this is the part that I will look to experiment more on aside from like basic DocC related stuff. And yeah, so what I want to do is take a few of these things that I think are I know are needs refactoring, and sort of try to massage that and figure out a way to like do a better job, better results from that. I'll see how that goes. Like I'm
curious about the refactoring thing, because I mean, again, it depends on what you mean by refactor, but like there's plenty of room to grow in like Xcode's horrible refactoring tools.
Sure.
I mean, I will try anything because I think refactoring is a very important part of designing and building software. You end up and software development, unless you're building the exact same thing that's already been built before in the exact same way or something, you're always going to need to try out designs, see it where it works, and then find out that there's some problem where there's a new requirement or whatever. You're going to need to modify that design, which requires refactoring. And refactoring tools can make or break your workflow experience. And I find Xcode so frustrating. It just seems so limited. And it's like how we're on like the 16th version of Xcode. Like, can we please have some better refactoring tools? Pretty please, Apple. It's like they just don't work half the time. The ones that are in there. Whereas you go on the like the Visual Studio side of things, and there's plugins, and you can get like amazing refactoring tools. That was way back in the day. So what was that company that does ReSharper? I guess I used to use that back in the day. It was amazing, and that was like 15 years ago or whatever. Right. So yeah, I'd love to see refactoring get better, maybe with these tools. I don't know if Apple Intelligence, or I guess it would be more like a Swift Assist feature. Yeah, would be like something like that. I don't know if that's something they mentioned though, but it would be something that makes sense to add. If like I just want to be like, I want to select like code and be able to tell it, like split this into maybe be able to like split this into another function and just have it like just do basic stuff. That's not even an LLM thing. Like, why can't Xcode just be like just split things out properly? It doesn't work half the time for me when I'm like, make this a function.
Like extract this in a method or something.
Extract
like that.
Doesn't work. It doesn't work half the time for me. I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
Well, it's funny. It's like it'll work, but it'll like place it somewhere or do something. Yeah, it'll do something.
Like this just took more effort than if I just typed it by hand and copied and pasted.
It's like, I don't know if this was that much. Yeah, I don't know if it was that way.
You know what I mean? But on the other hand, I don't want it to do too much at once. Like I wouldn't want the system to be like, okay, I'm going to make 4 new files and like split this code up and put it all these different places. Like, no, I don't want it to do that, because you have to refactor. And this is where TDD comes in, by the way, when that's part of the TDD helps you refactor, because you'd be refactoring one piece at a time without breaking stuff. And that because of the tests. But that's a whole other argument. I feel like people are just not going to get on board with TDD. I continuously try, and I have failed.
I think because you need to come up with metaphors and or something to incur, like some kind of carrot that will make it feel like it's so cool. I don't know. Rails tried and did not work. I don't know if there's another.
I don't know.
TCA probably is in that same boat in terms of like, hey,
I don't know.
We're pro TDD. I don't know if they are or not.
I have no idea. I don't know. I'm sure they're pro
testing.
They're pro testing. They have a great testing framework. So whether they do like the TDD, workflow, I do not know. But but testing is important. and refactoring is part of is used for that. And I'm curious to see how that works. I would like to try any of this stuff in Xcode, but I can't until I install macOS, and I'm still scared to install macOS on my personal. But I might get over that on my personal laptop. I don't know.
Like for me, it's not too dramatically different from what I've seen so far. It's kind of funny because I use the password app as actually it feels much better to use than I guess anything's better than the system profile, but
anything's better to go into settings.
It feels like if you're used to reminders app, it's similar in the layout and the structure of that. I find that like initially I was like a little put off by it for whatever reason, but like now that I'm used to it, it's actually okay. This feels pretty good. Like it's there. You can actually go and like sift through all your like security alert ones in an isolated spot. But that's actually pretty nice to like kind of like rock through and like do it in a
I have that in 1Password too.
Yeah. It has a couple nice features that I liked about it. The other thing about it is like the Windows management thing. There are like a variety of different little secret spots of like, oh, like you can use the same tricks to like get the alignment.
It's like Magnet.
Yeah.
Or Moom. I use both Moom and Magnet, and they're great.
And it does a pretty decent job. I think it's still a little weird, but I think it's if you come to the monthly meetings or the side project Saturdays.
Yeah. Well, here's my thing about the betas. Mm-hmm. I have to make sure they don't break software I use. Like in the past, they've been stable, but then something like Lightroom didn't work right. You know, I was like, and so I got a lot of software in here, and it's like I gotta make sure.
Very big caveat. If you need the current version of Xcode 15,
to submit things at a store,
just in general. Yeah, for
don't you need it? Don't you need it to submit things right now, or can you actually do 16?
You can do 16.
Oh, I thought because it used to be you couldn't with the betas ever submit to the store. Did they change that rule?
Yeah, if you've seen the recent like dark modes of like the iPad and all that, there's some third-party apps out there with the dark mode version of their icons. So you can only submit that with 16. That's my guess, at least.
I don't know. I'd have to check because I always thought Xcode betas wouldn't let you submit to app review because the iOS version was beta, so you couldn't.
Right.
Like I'm pretty, unless they change that rule, I'm pretty sure that's the rule. So that's why I would want to do it either because I have to submit things.
Yeah. If you gotta submit things, don't bother.
Anyway, I'll check on that. So that's a big one. If you need to use Xcode 15 for anything, don't install it. Why does Apple do that? Like, what did they do? Rip out code that 15 depended on? I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, on some level, like they deprecate stuff for a reason, but there must be something big and chunky, or they just don't want to
normal. That's not normal, though, right?
That's not their normal MO.
For the old version. Yeah, so they must have done. Apple Intelligence is such a big change in some ways, and it's going to be rolling out like into 2025 and beyond. I think 2025 is really when a lot of it's going to start rolling out. Like I think next WWDC is when we're going to see some of the stuff they announced. This dub actually coming out like near there. So I mean, I'm no doubt a lot of things are changing under the hood.
Yeah, I feel like this dub is like all that is just like you can look forward to that next year. And by the way, we're probably going to charge you for some of that goodness, which to me I'm like, great, I don't need to worry about it then.
Yeah.
So
anyway, we'll continue playing around with this stuff. It's getting hot as Hades in here. I think that's a saying somewhere in the world.
Yes.
And so I think it's time for us to wrap. Yes, actually, it is one of those. What do they call those?
Roguelikes.
Kind of game. Roguelikes, which I had to look up because I'm such a noob, such a gaming noob. I'm a Nintendo kid, so I don't know any of this stuff.
It is on the Switch.
But I had to look it up what that was.
Good on the Switch.
I know, that's why I have it. I had to look up what roguelike was. Like, why is it called roguelike? But it's a good game. Fun.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that's all we have for today. You can learn more about Philly Cocoa at phillycocoa.org, where you can find links to our Slack group, meetup schedule, and contact info. If you're feeling generous, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever your podcast platform of choice is, and share us with all your developer friends. And one more thing. I don't have any jokes today because I didn't have time to get them, so I'm just going to plug Azam Sharp's website. Azam Muhammad is one of our good colleagues at Philly Cocoa, and he has a Teachable site, azam.teachable.com, where he has a lot of tutorials on iOS development. He is a great teacher. He has a wonderful YouTube channel. He has tutorials on Reality Kit, Viper, Swift Data, making a credit card entry form app if you want.
God, he has a super base course right now that I want to look at.
Yeah,
that's cool.
And
he's also in Houston, and the hurricane just went through, and he was living in a tent in his backyard. Last I saw on X. So I think Azam should consider moving. Come here. We welcome you with open arms in the Philly area.
Please, Azam,
love you, Azam. Come up here.
Come up here.
Just uproot your entire family. But it's really funny. If you don't, you should follow him on X because he craps on Houston all the time. It's really funny.
Does. I thought for some reason I thought he was in Chicago for some reason, but yeah.
I don't know. Maybe he went there, but his content and his courses are top rated. Mm-hmm. I really get a lot of value from him. That's how we initially got in contact with him, because I was like, this guy is making great stuff. I learned so much. Yep.
And he's been a guest on ours.
Yeah, once. I'm back.
Yeah, so hopefully he comes back.
Yeah.
And so until next time, good luck on your own developer journey. We will cheer for you always.
The TDD gods